over the more important stuff. Not that everything Mike's going to say isn't important, but I know everyone wants to hear about the how we get money, right? Once we get through that, depending on how many folks we have in here right now, we have about 40. So we may take questions via chat. If you have those, feel free to type them into chat, and I'll make sure to note them at the end. And then if we can do so in an orderly fashion, we will allow folks to ask questions at the end. But we will take time to answer questions in whatever way works the best. We're all still working through this. So let's all behave, be nice, and try to make the Zoom meeting go smoothly. So first, Mike Perleberg with One Dearborn, if you wouldn't mind filling us in on what you guys have found here over the past couple weeks.
Sure. Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Jenny, for doing this, and thanks to everybody for joining. I see a lot of familiar names. See a few cameras activated. I imagine many of you, like I have been these past few weeks, have been working in your pajamas. Actually did put on a nice sweater today, and I shaved this morning, so I got that going for me. I can share with you that the pandemic's brought some changes in the Perleberg house, as it has to all of yours, certainly. And my wife and I are fortunate because we've not been laid off or furloughed. Our kids are home with us and healthy, but we've certainly been busy with our jobs, myself with One Dearborn, and my wife, she works in commercial lending with Civista Bank, so she's obviously busy right now. I can assure you their team's working around the clock on processing a massive influx of loan applications. And some of you may not be familiar with One Dearborn. A lot of the names I know in here are, but I'll share a little bit for those that aren't. We're the county's designated local economic development organization. Primarily, that means we're the organization which responds to business attraction requests that are distributed from the state of Indiana and from Ready Cincinnati. And we also work in the business retention and expansion space. And a big part of those three things are community development, because businesses want to be where their workforce is, and those people want to live in great communities, which we have here. Terry Randall, as you may know, is our president and CEO. She's checked in this morning. There's Terry. And she co-founded One Dearborn in 2017 as a privately funded organization, which works with our local government partners. And the organization brought me on this past October. So at the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, we've shifted more of our focus toward the business retention side, particularly medium to large employers in the county. We're also helping our nonprofits and communities across the county communicate, and also sharing regionally how Dearborn County is responding, and also kind of seeing what other communities are doing through this whole COVID situation. Earlier this week, you may have seen we compiled a first edition of the Dearborn County COVID-19 Economic Report. If you want to, you can read that at onedearborn.org. It's a summary of facts and data on the impact here locally. In 1 week, initial unemployment insurance claims in Dearborn County went from just 17 for the week ending March 14th up to 302 for the week ending March 21st. And that number jumped again to 411 for the week ending March 28th. The most recent week available. New numbers for last week, those will probably come out at some point today. You may have read news stories about Google sharing location data exhibiting how people are abiding by the stay-at-home order all across the US. They're collecting that data through anonymous location data with mobile devices. So got a phone, Google's watching, but they have put out some useful data just to see how down to the county level, how people are responding to stay-at-home orders. And Dearborn County level numbers for that show that residential location data is up 22%, retail and recreation are down 35%, grocery and pharmacy, they're down 11% in Dearborn County, and workplace location check-ins are down by 42% in Dearborn County. And hotels in our region and across the nation have been particularly hard hit. According to STR, and the Cincinnati Business Courier, occupancy at hotels in the Cincinnati metro area, which includes Dearborn County, are just 22%, and that's down by 67% from this time last year. So certainly Dearborn County has not been immune to the economic effect of COVID, as many of you know and are experiencing yourselves. One of the state level agencies that we work with at One Dearborn is the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. We're told by IEDC that several southeastern Indiana companies have donated or began producing PPE products for hospitals and first responders. They're now moving into phase 2 of that PPE procurement, which is less emphasis on the masks. And there's now a greater need for gowns, gloves, glasses, goggles, shoe covers, and sanitizers. Or know of a company in Indiana that might have been able to produce any of those, contact us at One Dearborn. You can find our contact info again at onedearborn.org, and we'll be happy to get that business hooked up with the state who can help get those items where they're needed most. And that's really all I got. At One Dearborn, we're a resource for any business in Dearborn County. Our president and CEO, she has a lot of experience in HR and risk management. She'd be happy to share what she knows. Networked. If you have a question, if you don't go directly to Eric or Jenny, we can do our best to help you out with that as well. That's all I got.
Great, thanks, Mike. Yeah, that first kind of concise report you put out was fantastic. I look forward to more of those. I think that really your skill and experience set. I think you're uniquely qualified to put that together. So it's been fantastic, and I look forward to seeing more of those. Really appreciate everything that One Dearborn is doing here throughout all this. I know everyone is working hard to keep busy and help the community in any way we can, and you guys are no different and doing a fantastic job. Thanks for all.
Thanks.
And we'll go now to Ginny Fowler, our Small Business Development Center local business advisor, who has been kind of on the front lines of this. I know she's working very closely with the SBA, with our local lenders, and with really everyone involved in trying to smooth what has been a rocky process so far, but hopefully we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, and more importantly, some zeros and some bank accounts for our local businesses. So Ginny, if you want to take it over and tell us all about the CARES Act.
Sure. Thank you, Eric, and thanks, Mike. Both of you guys have been really great on staying up to speed on everything and helping out with people. Again, I work for the Indiana Small Business Development Center, and so yes, I've been fielding lots of calls and having lots of these Zoom meetings to help people understand the CARES Act. And that's what I'm going to do today. I am actually going to share my screen, so as I talk about it, you can see some of the details and the explanations between the different CARES Act programs. Okay, so the CARES Act was, just to go back to the beginning, right, that was litigation, or it was a law that was passed by the House and the Senate and then ratified by the President. And this only happened probably, let's see, it's been 2.5 to 3 weeks ago. So the Small Business Administration was tasked with disseminating all of the money that was involved in these relief programs within the CARES Act. And the Small Business Administration has been working 24 hours a day to try and get some structure around that. Of course, it's not fast enough for everyone, but they've been trying very hard to get structure around how to disseminate the information. So what I'm going to do is tell you about the two main pieces. There's actually 3 pieces of it, but the third piece really isn't the greatest piece of it, and it already existed. So I'm going to start out with the first piece, which was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, otherwise known as the EIDL, or to the SBA, they call it the EIDL loan. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan was the first piece that was open because they already had a process around it. But it actually was given an influx of cash and an influx of money to be able to help stimulate and continue to help small businesses through this crisis. That EIDL loan is just that. It is a loan. It was the first piece. And at first, if any of you tried to get into that, it was probably pretty cumbersome, but now they have streamlined the application for that. That loan is, you can have within that loan up to $2 million. Depending on what you need, you can have up to $2 million. Now the loan is at 3.75% interest for small businesses and 2.5% interest for private nonprofits. You can then have also up to 30 years to pay back the loan. One of the really good parts is that your first payment is deferred for a year. So again, this is a loan. The first $25,000 or up to $25,000 is actually unsecured. So it doesn't need to be collateralized, and it also doesn't have a personal guarantee. And in fact, up to $200,000 doesn't need to have a personal guarantee. Over $200,000, you'll need to have a personal guarantee, and over $25,000, they will require collateral. Now, another little piece of the EIDL came in with the CARES Act, and it's a great piece for small business people to take advantage of. That is the immediate emergency grant portion. This is the forgivable portion of the loan. You can have up to $10,000 immediately within that loan. Now, when I say immediately, that is after the loan processor contacts you. And one thing to know about the EIDL is that this is directly administered through the Small Business Administration. So you don't go to a bank to get it, and the money will be flowing through the SBA. You go online to apply for it. They have a streamlined application. It should only take you no more than 30 minutes to actually apply. Keep in mind that if you don't, that you can't save your work, so you have to sit down and do it at one time. Then when you're finished with the application, you should receive a confirmation number. Now that application really isn't a complete application. It's more of a get into the queue. So once you get the confirmation number, you will be in a queue, or in other words, you'll be in line to be able to be processed. Once your loan processor picks up your application, they will take that over as a project manager, and they will contact you for the amount of money that you want. Now, that said, in the application, there isn't a place to put the amount of money that you want. And the reason for that is because that's going to be worked out on the back end with the project manager, but you can put in the note box an amount that you're looking for if you want. There is a place also to designate that you want the emergency grant. And so you need to click on that box, or you need to designate that you want that emergency grant. Again, the emergency grant portion is up to $10,000. And no matter whether you get an EIDL loan or not, you don't have to pay that back. And it also can be, all of this can be rolled into the next portion. Now, it's taking the Small Business Administration at least 3 weeks to get to these loans, to process these loans. So don't expect that you will get the emergency grant right away until you get a loan processor assigned. Then it should only, after the loan processor contacts you, it should only take another 3 days to get the emergency grant portion. So that's the EIDL, and it is the most structured. It is the one that started out in the beginning. They streamlined the process after about a week, and that made it a lot less painful for everybody. And if you're looking at my screen, that's the left-hand side. The second portion of the CARES Act for small businesses and private nonprofits is the Paycheck Protection Program. This piece really only opened up on Friday. And whereas the EIDL is processed through the SBA, the Paycheck Protection Program, otherwise known as the PPP, is processed through your local lender. So that means your bank. And the banks are swamped with processing these applications. And consequently, they have said, in fact, every bank that I've talked to and every bank I've heard of has said, look, we are going to work with our customers first. And if there's money left over, they will get to the non-customers. So if you're interested in the PPP, you need to contact your lender right away. Keep in mind that the EIDL, you can apply for that up through December 31st. And my expectation is that in the next waves of economic stimulus packages, there's going to be more money put into the EIDL. And right now they're talking about that. As well as there might be more money put into the Paycheck Protection Program. But that said, the first thing you want to do is the EIDL. The Paycheck Protection Program, though, is only open for application through June 30th as it stands today. And primarily this PPP is, again, it is a loan. And the intent of this is to keep people employed. So 75% of this must be used to pay payroll. The other 25% of this loan can be used for utilities, rent, and some mortgage interest payments. But the primary portion of it must be used for payroll. Whereas the EIDL can be used for payroll, it can be used for all operating expenses. The things you cannot do with these, you can't roll other debt in or consolidate debt. You can't take on new debt, you know, or take on other loans. This is primarily for this crisis, and it's primarily for operating expenses. So back to the PPP. The PPP, again, is for payroll. What they're going to do with this is they're going to look at your entire payroll, including any fees, taxes, any benefits, and actual wages for last year. They're going to look at that, and then they're going to divide it by 12 to come with up with an average monthly number, and they're going to multiply by 2.5 in order to come up with the forgivable portion, which is approximately 8 weeks of payroll, which is, again, forgivable. Much like the EIDL has the $10,000 forgivable portion, the PPP has 8 weeks of a forgivable portion. Now, if you need more than that, it's going to be a loan. And that loan is a 1% interest loan and with a payback of 2 years or a term of 2 years. But the first payment is deferred for 6 months. Okay, so those are the two main pieces of the CARES Act. The third piece is the SBA Express Bridge Loan. That already existed through the SBA. It's up to $25,000 for a 7-year term, and it's the interest rate is prime plus 6.5, or not to exceed prime plus 6.5%, fixed or variable. Now again, that doesn't have any forgivable part, not the best probably option for everyone. So here is my recommendation. My recommendation is that everybody who's interested in receiving these funds or needs to, and it is on your own recognizance, meaning you are a business who was actually injured by this crisis. Now, not all businesses have been. Not all businesses have been significantly injured. So this is on your recognizance that you have been injured by this. My recommendation is that everyone apply for the EIDL. It's quick, it's easy, and you can get into the queue because you know you have some time that you're going to have to work through this, right, before you get a loan processor. And you can get that emergency grant portion. Then, once you're finished with that, if you need to cover payroll, then the PPP is for you. If you have more than 3 employees, so more than 3 to 5 employees, the PPP would be for you. So if you're a business that's heavy service, heavy employee business, you want to apply for the PPP as well. That way you can get that portion with 8 weeks of forgiveness for payroll, right? And then use all of the EIDL money for operating expenses. Because again, the PPP, 75% of that has to be used for payroll. Only 25% can be used for those other few operating expenses. Now, to get the Paycheck Protection Program application, you need to contact your bank. And they probably will have a supplement. The banks have been actually pushing back on applicants to pull together the information for the actual total amount of your payroll, and they'll probably have a supplement to that to help with it, because I've seen that supplement going around. But they have been working also overtime to be able to process those applications, just like Eric said in the beginning. Those are the two main pieces of the CARES Act, and it does apply to private nonprofits, not public nonprofits, but private nonprofits, and now they just opened it up to religious organizations as well. So those are the main pieces of it. And so I'm open to anybody having questions. I'm going to stop the share now. And if you have any questions, I am open to answering questions.
So I'll go ahead and unmute everyone, and we will see how this works. Let's all ask in an orderly fashion. But if you do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask Ginny or any of us. But I imagine Ginny will have most of the answers.
Always something to learn.
You don't want to do anything.
Everyone is now unmuted. If you have any questions, feel free.
I have a specific question for Jenny. This is Frank Burton.
Hi, Frank.
On the payroll protection thing, I'm trying to get payroll protection for clergy. And it's been a question whether their housing allowance is going to be counted in part of the loan or it's taken out of the loan. Do you have any answer for that? Or have you heard anything about that?
Well, so the PPP for nonprofits has been pretty sketchy, so I don't have a specific answer. I think the question comes in this: are you offering that as within their benefit package?
We don't. We pay our priests their total pay, and then they take that off on their taxes.
Oh, okay. So
We don't, it has to be said it's a certain amount, but we pay them and they pay their bills.
Okay, so whatever you're paying there, if that's included within that paycheck, yes, you can get that through the PPP.
You take the whole thing off.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I should say this, there will be some tax deferment things at the end of the year. So I don't know the details of that yet. It hasn't been structured yet, but there will be some tax deferment implications, which I think will help. Another thing, here's another piece of advice that I'm giving people. And I think this is good advice because I was watching the National Chamber of Commerce video that Terry, thank you very much, you sent out. And they were giving the same advice. So I feel good about this. When you get the money, either set it aside in another account, checking account, or set it aside as another account within your accounting program and queue up all of your expenses either out of that checking account that are against it or track them all in separate expense codes and accounts within your accounting system so that at the end of the year, you can easily account for what you've spent against it. Right? I don't know how they're going to come up with this, but you want to have this easily available to you so you can pull all that information out and you can prove that you spent this money for appropriate expenses. Now, I don't know what will happen if you have extra money left over at the end of the year, but I would leave that in that account and not spend it in case you should have to pay that back. I don't know that you will have to, but no one knows that at this point, but that's good accounting practice to keep it separate. And at the very least, if you have a separate checking account, you'll be able to track all your expenses on your statements.
Makes sense.
Anyone else have some questions for Ginny or anyone involved? Has anyone gone through the process and have some experiences they'd like to share? I know that one question I had, Ginny, because I'm getting a lot of it, is do you have any advice for folks who are looking for help in terms of cash flow while they wait for these loans and the government assistance to come through?
Possibly the Express Bridge loan is the place to go because that way they can go through the bank. Now, I would say this, the bank is probably going to be faster than the EIDL, than the SBA in processing those loans, and talking to bankers, they have been faster than that. I would suggest this also, that you look through your cash flow items. first thing, if you have any loan payments, I would be contacting the lender and asking for either deferment on those payments or for being able to just pay interest or principal amounts. Most lenders have been super gracious about that and have been deferring those. In fact, they're under federal suggestion to do that for at least 90 days. So that's the first call you need to make. The second thing that you need to do is talk to any suppliers and ask that if you can have deferment on that too. Explain the situation and then defer, and hopefully they will be gracious about the deferments. Now we're all in this together, and it looks like it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks before you can probably get help on these things. But for instance, utility companies and some of those basic expenses, especially landlords, contact landlords and tell them the situation. Most people don't want to lose their customer base. And so they're not being hard-nosed about all of those things, but keep in mind, people need to get paid too. But that said, everyone is in it together. And so those are the best things. So in that, what you might have noticed inherent in that, I didn't say it out loud, but I'm going to say it now, is communicate, communicate, communicate. Communicate with your employees on what your policies are and your customers as far as whether you're open or not. Communicate using some of these new digital platforms. You have time, learn the platform, right? Or communicate in ways that they know what you're doing, and therefore communicate with your supply chain and your, your creditors. So communication is really important. Being empathetic in that communication is also really important because everyone is kind of in the same mode. I think I have another question.
I have a question for you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
If you apply for the EIDL for your $10,000 and then apply for the PPP, I had read where if you got the PPP, the EIDL was not forgivable. Did I understand you right? You can apply for both, and if you stay at the lower limits, like the 10,000 on the one and the 2.5 times on the other, they're both if you apply for both?
Yes, you can apply for both. The only thing about that is you can't use them for both for the same expenses. So consequently, if you apply for the EIDL and you decide the PPP is better for you, you can roll that into the PPP. But whatever you got in the forgivable portion will be subtracted from the forgivable portion of the PPP. So consequently, that's why I was saying that you probably, if you apply for both, the PPP is best for payroll, whereas the EIDL is best for operating expenses.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, I did have a private question. The question was, if you're a single member LLC or it files as an S Corp and you're the only employee, so you are the owner and the only employee, the best thing for you, I believe, is the EIDL, applying for that. Real estate, when someone asks privately also, what about real estate tax payments?
Real quick on that.
Excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick on that. Also explore for the first time, those individuals running their own businesses are eligible for unemployment insurance. So that's something to look into as well. So for your last question, make sure you are looking into that. I know if you've been a 1099 employee, that's probably consider, but you are now eligible through the new, more robust unemployment insurance.
Right, and they are recommending that everyone file.
Yep.
So if you're an independent contractor, file, because it may take a while, just like the SBA, for them to get to you also. And hopefully by then they'll have those independent contractors, gig workers, those people's structure done, the structure for payment of that. So they're encouraging everyone to file. And if you're laying off employees and you're filing or you're applying for the PPP, the expectation is that you're bringing them back and paying them, or you can't get the PPP. You have to bring them back. You can't lay them off and then continue to take the PPP money for payroll for them.
On the unemployment insurance, speaking with some of our contacts with Indiana Work One and River Valley Resources, as Jenny's saying, they are encouraging everybody to file if you've been laid off, furloughed, or think you may be eligible for the UI. Have to feel guilty about applying if you're not sure what your status is, because their system is set up to
Right.
go through the application. There will be questions, and the system will filter out whether you're eligible, what you're eligible for, and so on. So if you're not sure, just go ahead and apply, and their system will sort out what category you belong in and if you are eligible for UI.
I'm glad you jumped in, Mike, because I was kind of waiting because you really have been on the front edge of that, getting the Work One guy in. But so that said, one thing that I've heard is that
Hello?
the application or the
Oh, sorry,
filing
I lost you.
site, has been going down, and it has been crashing. So be patient, continue to try to file. And like Mike said, just answer the questions honestly and let the system work through that. Now, if you have employees, you can, the PPP is retroactive to back to February 15th. So you can pay those employees still with using the PPP. Now, if you pay them, they cannot apply for unemployment. And so, I mean, they can file, but they won't get unemployment for those times that they're paid. That said, I've had questions from people about having employees who just don't come to work because they're afraid. Okay, if an employee chooses not to come to work because they're afraid, especially ones that don't contact the employer first, those people are not eligible for unemployment. The only way they would be is if their employment was terminated or that they were laid off. If neither of those are the case and they choose to stay home, especially without having any kind of conversations with their employer, it's basically like quitting. So you can get through the CARES Act some sick leave payments and help with sick leave, but if you don't have anyone sick at home, the employee can't just stay home without a conversation with the employer, especially because the PPP is applied for and gotten through the employer, not the employee. So it's up to the employer about whether they're paying them or not. So that's a communication thing that needs to happen with the employer and between the employer and the employee. Property tax payments. Those are local and through the county, and I have not seen anything from the county.
It's so stupid the way the Republicans put this through. It's just so stupid.
Yeah, our property tax, I think.
So I'm not sure what the stupid thing was, but
We haven't got any little thing from them yet.
No.
Okay.
Dollars we pay for if we buy a
hey
typewriter.
guys, you might want to mute yourself.
Is that a question or just a conversation, Mr. Phelps?
Well,
Oh, Mr. Phil, ask him.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
Ask him.
Did you have a question?
Well, no, I didn't. I just looked at the fact that having a person not work and get unemployment versus working and not and then getting a paycheck seems like it could be better if they would have a under one section where somebody, whether they could work or couldn't work, or they had to stay home because of the epidemic, could have it all put into one account and they could get paid that way. That's all.
Going back to the property tax question that was raised a moment ago, that was one of the governor's executive orders dealt with that. In all 92 Indiana counties, the May 11th deadline has been the deadline in most counties. However, under the governor's executive order, they are waiving late payment penalties for up to 60 days after the May 11th deadline. So while May 11th is still technically the deadline, if you pay later than that, there will be no penalties for anybody paying their property tax installment for the spring late.
Thank you, Mike. Now that you say it, I did remember. I saw the governor talk about that, and I totally forgot that. That was awesome. Good. There's. Go ahead.
I said there's a lot to remember out there, so I think we'll forgive you for that. That's why we're working together, right?
Everybody wants to know about that property tax payment, by the way. Me personally, I'm a Dearborn County resident, so yes.
Right, I got my bill sitting right here in front of me. I gotta get that.
I looked at mine yesterday. Yes.
You can do those electronically in Dearborn County, or they do have a drop box at the courthouse too. So you don't got to worry about actually going into the treasurer's office to pay it.
That's good. There's a couple other questions. I don't know if you wanted to ask those, Eric, or you want me to.
Yeah, so we have a question. Must PPP funds be spent in a required time frame, such as fiscal year?
They have not said I have not read anything seriously about that, about a time frame. They are assuming, of course, again, this is on your own recognizance that you need this money. So assuming that you need to pay this right away for these 2 months that we're in, and that when you come back, when this is opened back up again and we're past the crisis time period, that your cash flow will kick back in and you'll be able to pay your wages. I don't believe they have a time frame specifically overtly said, but I think that is the assumption. Once again, a good reason for having a separate account.
Absolutely. Have you gotten any?
One thing on filing the PPP, and what I've heard from a few different lenders is that they are looking first at their customers. We touched on that already, but they are looking first at the application submitted by their existing lending customers. So if you're looking to get the money quickly, it may be beneficial to do so through the lender with which you have an existing loan, because you'll tend to get looked at first before any new customers do. There are some banks who aren't operating that way, but I think most of our locals are. So that's something to consider when you're thinking of which lender do I apply for the PPP through. You probably want to look first at the bank where you have an existing loan, because you're kind of put on the top of the pile as opposed to put off in a separate pile that they'll get to later.
Right, that's absolutely the case, yes. Every single lender that I've talked to, every single lender I've heard about has said exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I'll be surprised if there's many lenders that have excess capacity and start going outside of their existing customer base. I think that'll pretty much,
yeah.
I think their own customers will pretty much take up their entire capacity in almost all instances.
And one thing I want to add to that too is I have heard, now not in our local area, but I have heard that there are banks who are choosing not to participate. So people who have lenders that are not participating in the PPP program are forced to go to other banks. And it's unfortunate, but I have not heard that in our area yet at all.
I haven't heard that either.
And I cover 6 counties, so. There's some other questions here about, go ahead and
the only other one I have here is if you get the $10,000 grant, are there any tax consequences?
At this point, no. The issue for that $10,000 grant, I believe that's where the tax deferment comes in at the end of the year, which they haven't structured yet and said a lot about yet. But I believe there'll be tax deferment on it. But again, that's me speculating based on things I've heard and not seeing. There's one other question that someone sent privately, and they said, it's a good question I haven't had yet. With PPP, is the expectation that employees retain normal amount of hours, or can they work reduced hours due to lower workload, but be paid for full-time hours like they would under normal circumstances? Good question. That is up to the employer. If you want them to come in and work full-time and you'll pay them full-time, then because you are the one who is getting the PPP. If you want them to do that, that's great. If you're willing to allow them to work reduced hours and still pay them full, for full pay, then that's fine.
The only thing that matters is compensation, right? As long as you're compensating them to the
Right.
required per
Right.
the statute, then that's fine. Yeah, RJS mentions Kemba as of last week was not eligible for PPP. Ginny, correct me if I'm wrong, but the SBA is working pretty hard to get a number of new banks and maybe non-traditional institutions qualified as SBA lenders. Is that correct?
Yes, they are. There were a lot of already, I guess, what do they call them? Preferred SBA lenders,
Mhm.
but every bank, Kemba is not, that's a credit union, so that's the issue there. But every bank can do SBA lending, but not every bank is an SBA preferred lender. And consequently, that's where some of the issues came in. But banks can choose whether they want to do this kind of lending or not. So that's an issue. But yes, to answer your question, Eric, yes, they are working very hard to get as many banks as possible and lending institutions and even, non-traditional lending institutions to be able to do it. I have another question. Are you seeing that from AJ?
I'm not.
Okay, I'll ask, as a sole member LLC S Corp, can the the EIDL 10K be used for salary for yourself or used to replenish savings, or does it need to be used for other overhead? You can use it for salary for yourself. Yes, you can. Now, replenishing savings is kind of a twofold question there. If you're just, if you spent that money prior to February 15th, you cannot use it. But if you spent that money on operating expenses after February 15th, yes, you can, because you could apply them to that $10,000. And yes, it is to be used on those fixed and variable expenses. You can use it for inventory as well.
And you can use it for anything, right? It just won't be forgiven. Is that
No, you can't use it for consolidating debt. You
Okay.
can't use it for buying a new business or anything like that. You can't use it for that. But you can use it for any of the operating expenses. And that does include independent contractors or sole proprietors who are, their own business, one-man show or so, one-woman show, right? And that have been paying themselves or want to take a salary. You can use it for that, yes. A big portion of this was to keep people employed. Really, right. It was.
Do we have any other questions? Jenny, do you have any other that came in on your end?
No, I don't.
Okay. Anyone else have anything?
I hope this was
and move forward.
Okay. You were just asking, can you ask again?
So those are my two items. Everything else I'm just sending out in weekly updates, as I don't need to send.
Don't believe that was for us.
I don't think so.
Right. Well, thank you everyone for hopping on with us here. We will have this available in video form. And if you the document that Ginny shared, she will I'm sure be happy to share that with
Absolutely. If someone has a specific question, they can contact me directly also at gfaller@isbdc.org, or you can contact me over the phone, 812-537-0814, extension 124.
Yeah, and we will we'll get this out. We'll get it up. We'll get the video up as soon as we can. If you know of anyone who's looking for information, I think this is probably a pretty good place to start. Have them contact Jenny, have them contact One Dearborn, or have them contact us at the chamber. Also, if you have any other topics you'd like us to address, any other things that you would like us to host a meeting on, we're happy to do so, and we will continue putting these on throughout the stay-at-home orders. So hopefully, everyone, keep your distance, wash your hands, and stay healthy. Have a great Easter, and try not to stress too much about all the homeschooling you're having to do right now. I'm just proud of my kids. I don't think you heard them once this whole time. So,
One last thing, Eric, I did have some questions from people that I don't have their contact information. They'd like a copy of that document. I can send that to you if you want to post it on your website.
yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely something that everyone can have, and it goes into a little bit more detail about some of these programs.
Perfect. Yep, I will get it up with the video.
Thank you for
Thank you guys very much. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah.